Donald Trump's increasingly dangerous rhetoric, like when he calls Democrats the, quote, enemy from within, it is very similar, dare I say nearly identical to the rhetoric of Hitler, Stalin, and Mussolini. That's according to a new piece in The Atlantic that argues Trump's intent with that language is to dehumanize his opponents. Why? So he can do whatever he wants. As our next guest, Michael Cohen, knows all too well, it is one of the many ways Donald Trump threatens people that he disagrees with. Never forget this moment from his congressional testimony in 2019.
How many times did Mr. Trump ask you to threaten an individual or entity on his behalf?
Quite a few times.
50 times?
More.
100 times?
More.
200 times?
More.
500 times?
Probably.
Joining us now is the ex-president's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen. He's the the host of the Michael Cohen Show on YouTube, the podcast Mea Culpa, and the co-host of the podcast Political Beatdown. He's also the author of Disloyal, a memoir, and Revenge, How Donald Trump Weaponized the U.S. Department of Justice Against His Critics. Michael Cohen, I could just imagine that you have lots of thoughts this morning.
You can only imagine. Look, there's so much that's going on, and it's not just Hitler or Mussolini. These are words, actually, that Joe McCarthy used to use, the enemy from within. And we know all about Joe McCarthy. But we also, of course, know about Mussolini and Adolf Hitler. Why he's taking this route, I have no idea. But look at the timeline of Trump. Look at how it started going back to 2015, 2016, when he came down, he descended from the golden escalator, and he started talking about Mexicans. And after Mexicans, he went to blacks, and he went to immigrants, and then he went to Jews, and then he went to the homosexual, the LGBTQ plus community, then transgender, then he went to, and now all of a sudden, I mean, we can just go on and on. He's talking about Haitians and people from the Congo and Venezuelans. Now, all of a sudden, what's he talking about? Arnold Palmer's junk? I mean, let's be serious. This is not a man who the people of the United States should want to have as their representative when you have to deal with serious leaders around the world.
So Mike, to continue on that point, here's how The Atlantic sums up Trump's rhetoric of late. Several generations of American politicians have assumed that American voters, most of whom learned to pledge allegiance to the flag in school, grew up with the rule of law and have never experienced occupation or invasion, would be resistant to this kind of language and imagery. Trump is gambling knowingly and cynically that they are not. And I would agree with that assessment.
I do as well.
I was going to ask you, how do you see that gamble playing out?
I do as well. And one thing that we've talked about here on this show, and I've spoken with you offline as well, Mike, about it, I was unconstitutionally remanded. You know, we're all talking about trying to sane-wash the words that Donald Trump says. Donald Trump used the Department of Justice. He weaponized the Department of Justice in order to prevent me from putting out my first book, Disloyal, and had me remanded back to prison, placed back into solitary confinement during COVID, right? For what? Violating my First Amendment constitutional rights. You know, this case now is, there's a writ of certiorari before the Supreme Court of the United States. It's with Justice Sotomayor. If you think that this is just an anomaly, that I'm the first political prisoner held by my own country because I wouldn't waive my First Amendment constitutional right, every single person that's watching this program needs to understand that it could be them next. There are no more guardrails against him, especially as a result of the recent Supreme Court decision of presidential immunity. He will take everything to the nth degree.
Michael, I want to jump in, but I think your face tells me you have like a lawyer question you want to ask Michael Steele.
No. I disagree with Mike. I think that we're at a very interesting moment that Donald Trump is still able to carry out and behave the way he has been behaving, and yet the American people who grew up pledging allegiance to the flag, understanding the rule of law, are willing to capitulate and give that over to this guy, knowing, to what Mike just said, that their constitutional rights could be abridged if they run afoul of Donald Trump.
Mike, these are also the same people who spent their lives, for example, in church praying with a Bible that didn't contain the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. I mean, I don't understand what's going on. Donnie Deutsch said it this morning on Morning Joe, where he turned around and he goes, I don't understand what's going on and what the American people are thinking these days.
That's a rerun, sir, just so you know when you were watching.
Oh, I apologize.
Lest someone's like, Donnie Deutsch, okay. Here's my question to you. What's happening with him? Like, there is something, right, there's a certain amount of this that we have seen over the course of the last 8 years. There's also a piece of it that feels like something new, a page turn, his own campaign admitting that he's exhausted.
Well, not only does he look exhausted, he's behaving like somebody who's exhausted. But I think it goes more than that. He doesn't look well, and he's certainly going off on these. I'm not a doctor, so it's not fair to me to say, but it's dementia. It appears to be in line with what one would classify as dementia. He starts rambling about anything or everything. He doesn't want to have a conversation anymore, so he starts dancing for 40 minutes. And the part that irritates me the most is when people start applauding. Oh my God, he goes like this, and then the crowd starts applauding. What's funny about that? It would be funny if it's Saturday Night Live, but it's not funny when you're talking about the president of the United States of America, the guy who's leading, right, one of our two political parties in this country. So what's going on with him? I also think that a lot of it has to do with the 4 indictments that are still remaining. It's like the 3 plus the 1 superseding. The 34 counts of guilt, the $600+ million that he owes in civil fines as a result of both E. Jean Carroll and the New York Attorney General case. He knows that if he doesn't win, that his entire legacy, his entire life, his finances, everything about him is going to be completely destroyed. So he's not running to become president of the United States. He's running to protect himself, his legacy, and his money. Mostly his money.
Michael Cohen, what do you want the American people to truly understand about your experience and with Donald Trump, particularly the Justice Department, how you were targeted? And I say this because there are lots of folks, well-meaning folks that don't even well-meaning people who support Donald Trump, and then people who do not, that still say, I don't think he's really gonna. He sounds a little out there, but I don't think he's really gonna do any of these things. Wow. When, to your point, it has happened to you, it has happened to others, and so now what we are potentially facing is, if in fact he is elected, he's being very clear about what it is he would do.
Well, he's 100%. First of all, I happen to be the only political prisoner right now to date who's been incarcerated, remanded to prison because I refused to waive my First Amendment constitutional right. And that's what I'm hoping that the Supreme Court will take up in the writ of certiorari that's currently before them. Mark my words on it, though. When he says that he intends to go after his enemies and his critics, why are you not listening to him? Let us all stop sane-washing his words. I don't understand how, whether it's the J.D. Vances of the world or the other acolytes, the sycophants that are out there, and say, well, that's not really what he meant. He's not going to do that. There are no more guardrails up for Donald Trump. One, as a result of the Supreme Court recent decision, and two, because he's already gotten away with it. Knowing what he did to me, that was the beginning. That was him creating a playbook for the future.